On today's show, Darrell's going to dive into how we master a pitch. Hey guys, welcome back to Strategic Baseball Podcast. If you guys caught the last episode, we talked about practicing to mastery. So in the next couple episodes, we're going to talk about how we master a pitch and then how we master a swing. Today, we're going to talk about how we master the pitch. So Geoff and Darrell here, and we help baseball players get to the next level with a strategic advantage so that they can play with supreme confidence against the best players at any level. In every episode, we promise to deliver value on the strategic side of player development to help your players compete with players just as good, if not better than them. As mentioned earlier, today we're going to talk about the process and how we master a pitch. Remember, Darrell's a pitching strategist. I am a hitting strategist, and this is Strategic Baseball Podcast. If you are interested in joining our circle, head over to strategic-baseball.com, which you can also find in the show notes, and submit your email to always get a reminder each time we release a new episode, weekly tip from Darrell and I, and a PDF transcription and visual of the previous episode, and much more. If you are a player, a parent, or a coach who is interested in learning more about how the strategic advantage baseball process works for you and your unique situation, please email me at jeff@athletic-mission.com or darrell@dc@startpitching.com, both of which you can also find in the show notes. And we would love to arrange a time to talk with you and see how we can help. So Darrell, let's get into this today. We're talking about how we master a pitch. So go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, Geoff, I want to break down today kind of what we do at Athletic Mission to kind of walk through how we develop pitches. And I think when we talked about last episode about what it takes to kind of practice until mastery, we kind of gave them the 10,000 foot view and kind of walk through a little bit of the conversations that we have here and kind of the framework. And so today I wanted to kind of walk through what we specifically do. And so there's about an 8 or 9 step process that we want to understand if we're going to get pitchers to throw a certain pitch. So today I'm going to walk them through just what we do to help them develop their fastball. And so the first thing that we want to do is really get an idea of what the purpose of that pitch is. And so with fastballs, we want to understand whether we're going to do a 2-seam or a 4-seam. We want to understand how our grip, wrist, and forearm angle will affect the spin that creates the movement of the pitch. And we want to have that baseline understanding of what a pitch really is, that we don't just grab the baseball and throw it. And believe it or not, man, we see that a lot. When I ask guys how they grip the baseball or why they grip a baseball a certain way, I'm always amazed at a lot of the answers. It's either the way I've always done it, or maybe some coach showed them a special grip to get the ball to do a certain thing. And when we see that piece of it and we start with the grip and the wrist and forearm angle, it fits into that process that you and I have always wanted to focus on. We want to be able to deconstruct what should happen in a game backwards. And again, I know that probably seems new and French to a lot of coaches that started with mechanics, that started with the movement patterns, that starts with how do we throw a baseball? And again, all of that stuff's important. And we'll get to that in a few minutes. But at the beginning and kind of fitting into what our philosophy here is at Athletic Mission, we want them to understand that there's got to be a strategic advantage for why they throw that pitch, that we don't just throw a fastball, man. We got to have a purpose, and we find ourselves that baseball is nothing but a game of situations and counts, and we got to master pitches so we can decide when we're standing on the rubber and that catcher's putting the sign down, what is the absolute best pitch I could throw to get that hitter out? And when we start with that thought process and that kind of strategic thinking at the very beginning, then it gives us a true foundation of what it should look like on game day. Now we can start going into the mechanical piece, how we set up on the mound, how do we where do we set up on the mound? Where do we put our feet on the rubber? What kind of position we're going to be in when we get the sign from the catcher? And then what are we going to do when we come set? That's kind of that first piece that I want them to understand. I want them to see it. Every drill we do, I want them to go through their pre-pitch routine. I want them to literally see that. We got to train the brain on what we want it to do on autopilot whenever we're in a real baseball game under extreme pressure. We don't want to be focused on the mechanical side of pitching when we're in a real baseball game. We want to be focused on the strategic side and the strategic aspects of it. And I think that's where a lot of the baseball world's at today, man. A lot of the coaches now are really focused on the competitive advantage piece, what we call the level one stuff. You know, building athletic athletes or developing and training athletic athletes, man. I love that. I want guys to set up in the most athletic, powerful position that they feel in. I want it to be natural and instinctive when they set up on the rubber, that it don't feel like it's forced, that it feels like I'm setting up in a power position. And so we really do focus on that piece of the mechanic setup when we get on the mound and start addressing the rubber when we're looking in to get the sign from the catcher. And then I want them to have a first feel. I want them to feel that foot in the ground. I want them to understand that everything that we're getting ready to do now is purely based on how do we see that pitch in our mind? How do I feel that grip, wrist, and forearm angle in my glove? And then what is the rhythm, tempo, and timing that it's going to take for me to get to release point and execute the pitch? And then I think we can really start breaking down the concept of the grip pressure, the wrist and forearm angle, and really kind of work through what it really takes to execute a pitch. And I think when we start right there, Geoff, with that foundation of it, and we start with what is the end result in mind first, then as we start practicing, these guys are able to give us feedback on what they feel is working and what's not working. And again, every one of these guys are different type of athletes. Every one of these guys got a little bit different arm slot. They got a little bit different hand size. They got a little different grip strength and wrist and forearm angle strength. All the different components that it takes to be able to consistently execute pitches consistently and execute pitches on time and find that release point consistently, then those are the skill sets as we start really focusing on the practice until mastery that we want to walk through. And sometimes I think we just take this big picture look at it, or we just kind of generically say, hey, here's what pitching mechanics are. And we don't realize that every one of these young athletes are truly at a different level, strength-wise and physical capability-wise. And the role that piece plays into the way we practice, and then like you talked about earlier, the takeaways that we have from practice, I think that's the key to understanding how we learn a pitch, how we develop a pitch, and then how do we honestly practice it till mastery. So when we start with that strategic thought, and then we focus on our setup, literally the setup that we have, like when we put our foot on the rubber as we stare in and get the sign from the catcher. And then how do we come set? What are we supposed to feel right then? Then what is the literal first move that I have before I'm going to move home and really start to move and get the rhythm and tempo and timing of my mechanics or my movement pattern into, honestly, front foot strike to release to finishing that pitch. When we kind of put it in that framework, it gives these guys a chance to really kind of have a step-by-step process to, okay, this is what I need to do every single time. Now, is it literally repeatable? No, we know that baseball is a physical game, that when we burn energy and calories, that the next pitch is not going to have exact same type of energy and movement that the last one did. But we can help these guys develop a consistency and a pattern that is pretty close to being repeatable, to where now that when they're under extreme pressure in a real game, man, they get the idea of that, hey, this now when game day starts, and you and I are always talking about the struggle that these guys that are really, really good athletes, man, and a lot of times do a lot of good things, whether it's in the bullpen or in the cage or even in practice, that struggle taking it to the game, man. And that's kind of the whole strategic advantage baseball process that you and I created, was to kind of build that bridge from practice to a game. That was consistently the question that we were getting all the time. And so you and I knew that the conversation like we're having today, man, is not a normal baseball conversation. It's not what you're probably going to get when you go to your local pitching coach for a pitching lesson. But for us here, and for the type of athletes that we're getting and the quality of players that we're getting, that if they want to level up and continue to be able to execute pitches against the best hitters that they're going to face, or to level up and want to play against, then we got to create this process, man, of how do we master one pitch, and then how do we master an off-speed pitch? How do we master our breaking pitches? And how do we find that consistency within all of that? And I think that is the most frustrating thing that we've seen from players, is that they hear these surface level generic type of, you got to have good mechanics. You got to have, you got to throw 90 miles an hour, or, you got to have this certain grip or this certain wrist and forearm angle. And the truth is, man, there is some basics that go through all of those pieces. But the individuality piece of that, Geoff, and the way that we can sit here and break players down now with video and give them that personalized, individualized feedback, and the ability for each one of them to really have their own grip, wrist and forearm angle, and feel and release point. And is the pitches going to move differently? Yeah. But at the same time, man, the concept of what we need to do to consistently execute pitches, to keep hitters off balance, and to really give these guys a mastered skill set, or a mastered set of pitches that they can go consistently execute under extreme pressure in a real baseball game, is the only reason why they come. It's the only thing that players really want. And when they get that piece and that concept of what it takes to practice that way, I think that's the guys that we've seen that have had the most growth. And man, it is unbelievable to have conversations with these guys, because some of them are 12 and 13 years old. These ain't college and pro level kids. These are guys coming back from the weekend, and they're giving us feedback, man. Like, and I've told you a couple of times, like, I'm absolutely blown away with the feedback that this kid's giving me, because he understands. He understands the way he feels, the way he moves. And when it's not working, he's able to make game time adjustments. So what that does tell us that we can have deeper conversations, but in the baseball practice world, or in that context, it's probably not going to happen in a team environment. It's going to be in a situation like we do here at Athletic Mission, where we kind of try to coordinate with what the coaches are wanting that from the teams they're playing on, and really focus on how do we get these guys individually to be able to develop that skill set, or really kind of fine tune what those coaches are working on, and giving them the ability to go at their team practices and implement the stuff that they want to do, and then effectively throw bullpens that's going to help them prepare for game day. And so I know that's kind of deep, man. And I know it feels like it is, because it's not a normal conversation that we're having in the pitching world. But the reality of the conversations and the time that it takes to master a pitch is not something that we're going to learn in a 5-minute YouTube video, and it's not going to learn in a 6-pack of pitching lessons. It's got to be a foundational thing for these kids, so they can understand what is the purpose of this pitch, what kind of types of situations and counts would this pitch be the most effective, and then working backwards into, okay, now how do I develop it, the feel and the power and the strength and the athleticism that it takes to physically do it, and then turn that into a mastered skill set that I can create a strategy against a hitter that would work on game day in a real game.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And you can see how, getting our pitchers to think baseball and throwing scenarios at them and pressure at them in practice to see how they respond, to see what they're thinking and why they're thinking and how they're thinking. And then, how do we prepare for each one of those situations or thought process that come up in a real game?
Yeah, man. And I think it does shift from when we're looking for a new technique or a new tactic or a new shiny object cure. And it gets back to the reality of what the core problem usually is, man, which is some feel, some movement, and then the belief in it. And again, belief is not just positive self-talk. Belief is, have I practiced it until I mastered it? And mastered don't mean perfect. It means that I can do it on purpose. In the baseball world, mastery is not about being perfect. It's about, can I consistently execute this movement, this swing, this pitch to give me the ability to go play against an opponent in a real baseball game. And I think sometimes we complicate that way too much, but at the same time, we don't go deep enough for each one of these guys to give them more than just that physical ability, that we give them that strategic ability, that strategic mindset to kind of see it from a strategic advantage place instead of it being whether I'm physically capable of. So it goes from I can't to what am I seeing and what's really happening. And when we can kind of see that mindset shift between I can or I can't versus, okay, what am I seeing from my opponent and how do I make that adjustment? Now, all of a sudden, we're starting to see that growth happen. And again, man, I think, this is a deeper conversation. I get it. But I think this is also the part, Geoff, that is really what's separating what the guys here are doing and the feedback that we're getting, man, because it's really cool to start having conversations. And most coaches I know love having that deeper conversation. They would love to have kids come in and ask questions like, hey, I had this guy in this count, man, and I could throw this pitch. But, man, at the same time, I was wondering whether this pitch was really the best pitch I should throw. And that's kind of the way I frame it. I want you to pick the absolute best pitch that you think is that you should throw in that situation and count, man. You can use past history data, and you can use what you maybe want to do to this guy the next pitch. But the reality of it is we need to execute every pitch, as if that is the absolute best pitch that I could throw in that situation and count. And when they do, they just have a mindset shift, man, that takes that confidence and drives that competitiveness to the point now where they feel like they're in control. And when we can give these young athletes that ability to feel like they're in control of not only their physical capability and skill set, but when they're in control of the decision-making process and they feel like they got a plan and a strategy versus this hitter, then, man, it's a totally different game then. And that's what's cool, brother, just to be real about it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool too when our pitchers come in and they can talk about a specific situation that happened in one of their games, or even the playoff games that are on TV now and they're watching. They can pick out a situation where it kind of likely changed their performance or the performance of the pitcher on TV, and now they're curious as to what they were thinking, why they were thinking that, or what they were feeling at that very moment. So the awareness is cool, and it brings a good, post-game conversation when they come in.
Yeah, man. And that's what's fun about doing the podcast now, man. Now people are getting to hear what you and I talk about every day. And it probably feels like 10 miles deep for some of them, but for those coaches and those players and parents out there that are like, yeah, man, we want a strategic advantage, or we want, to consistently go compete against the best players in the world, that it takes more than physical capability. And I'm not downplaying physical capability. I'm just saying that if you want to consistently go pitch against the best hitters in the world that are preparing for what you do, and they know you and they know your patterns, habits, and tendencies, then your ability to trust your mastered pitches and your ability to be able to read and study hitters and be able to execute pitches under extreme pressure is going to be 100% based on how you practice till mastery. And do you understand that the concept is to master a pitch that I can throw in any situation and count? That I'm not a patternized sequence type of, that a pitching coach or a good hitting coach after 2 innings is going to have a pretty good idea of what I'm getting ready to throw. And so that mindset is that we master a pitch that we can throw in any situation and count. And then when we have 2 or 3 different types of pitches that we have mastered that we can throw in any situation and count, now we become that next level strategic pitcher. And that's ultimately the goal that every player that I've met has wanted in some shape or form. But we really just didn't give them that process to help them understand that, hey, man, we focus so much in the baseball world on physical capability. And I get it, man. I get it. Coaches don't get a lot of opportunity to see kids in person and that. And so college coaches and pro scouts are having to make decisions based on the data and information they have. I get all that. But the reality of how we develop guys individually and really develop pitchers individually is giving them that concept of that, hey, man, if I got a mastered skill set, no matter what the velocity is, if I got a mastered skill set and I can throw pitches on purpose, and then I got a strategy and I got an idea of what these hitters are trying to do to me, then I got a chance to go out and have a lot of fun playing baseball. And if we can keep those guys playing, that age group, those 12 to 13, 14, 15-year-olds engaged into the strategic side of it, maybe before they develop physically, then I think the baseball is just going to get better, and we'll keep some of the better athletes that maybe ain't really good baseball players yet, but have a chance to be if they really understand what it's going to take to practice until mastery, and then taking that mastered skill set as they develop into what we call their man bodies, as they develop into their man bodies, and we can keep these kids still playing baseball, brother. And that's ultimately the goal you and I've had from day one with this program.
Yeah, good stuff, man. So, hey, as we wrap up this episode, Darrell, how to master a pitch. What's the big takeaway that you want our listeners to take from this conversation on how to master a pitch?
Takeaway I want them to take from today's conversation is that we can have deeper conversations with these kids. Do we need to frame it in a way that gives them the ability to see how they could do it in a real game? Absolutely. And also understand that the strategic side of this is the piece that these kids really want. Now, does it come through skill development? Yes. Does it come through being physically capable of doing pitches and meeting the expectations and measurables that coaches want to? Yes. But at the end of the day, the game of baseball is a strategic game, and the players that feel like they have a strategic advantage and a strategic mindset to kind of see the game that way are always the ones that seem to have the most fun, man. And that's what I want these guys to take away, that we can be strategic and have a blast at the same time, and then continue to develop our physical skills. And as they kind of sync together and intertwine, we're going to see the growth in the individual development of these players that ultimately will show up on game day.
Very good. So this episode was how to master a pitch. Listen, if you guys are finding any value in these episodes, please leave us an objective review, and also head over to strategic-baseball.com and join our circle. Darrell and I are working on some stuff. Right now it's kind of slow rolling out, but we're working on some stuff, and we're going to look forward to sharing some stuff. So anyway, thank you for listening, and catch our next episode, which is going to be how to master a swing.